I've been meaning to do my own Cinema Win style videos for all of the Star Wars movies for a long time. Well, today, it begins. I'm going to talk about everything I love about A New Hope. These are going to be more personal choices. I'm not necessarily going to stop every time a new character enters the frame or every time John Williams does something amazing, because nearly everything about Star Wars has become iconic at this point. But whatever, let's begin. Before we even get to the movie, I love the 20th Century Fox fanfare, and I miss it. I used to think it was just part of Star Wars, they were that closely related in my mind. I more recently learned from the excellent podcast, The Soundtrack Show, that Lucas wanted to use the fanfare specifically because it had not been used in movies all that much in the 70s. The recording he used was low fidelity and didn't sound that great, so audiences heard it, and then silence, and then John Williams' amazing sounding score kicked in, blowing everyone away, especially when compared to the older recording of the fanfare. That is such a cool trick. I love seeing A Long Time Ago in a Galaxy Far, Far Away. That goes for every Star Wars movie, but obviously A New Hope did it first. There's something about being in a theater, seeing those blue words appear. The audience all knows to shut up and just watch and listen. It's a magical feeling seeing those words at the start of a new movie. And then boom, Star Wars appears in those beautiful yellow letters and people go wild. You can't not get hyped when you see that and John Williams' music is blasting through the speakers. I've got a video on the way all about the crawl for this movie and why it's perfect. As a kid, I didn't fully appreciate it. I just read it and was like, okay, I'm ready to see some ships and lasers, please. But in just a few short sentences, the crawl gives you everything you need to know to understand the coming story. Obviously, I'm going to talk about the opening shot, how it visually tells you everything you need to know about the Rebel Alliance and the Empire and how this is a total David versus Goliath story. But what I really love is that every time I watch it, the Star Destroyer goes on longer than I expect it to. It's huge. I love that there's another 3PO unit walking right behind C-3PO. It immediately tells us that there is nothing special about this character we're about to spend so much time with. He's just a standard droid, swept up into an adventure he has no way of fully understanding. I love how the line, "There'll be no escape for the princess this time," gives us this sense that Princess Leia, who we haven't even seen yet, has been getting into situations like this for a while, and she has escaped again and again. She's been a thorn in the Empire's side. We haven't seen her yet, but already we're on her side. I've always liked this rebel soldier here, Pelos Scrambus, which is a delightfully dumb name. I can't tell you why, but there are always random background soldiers that I will get attached to for no reason. Like this archer from Rohan and the Two Towers. I don't know why I like him so much. He's just awesome with his sideways bow. Look at him. Pelos Scrambus was the first random soldier I decided to really like for no reason, and then he dies. There's this sound effect you can hear as a rebel trooper gets shot that sounds like a plane taking a nosedive. I don't know what it is, but I make that noise every time I watch this movie. I like this trooper that just drops his dying buddy's head the second Vader enters the room, like, sorry Hank, you're gonna have to die on your own. And obviously I love Darth Vader, I feel like that goes without saying, but just in case, I want everyone to know that yes, Darth Vader is great, the most iconic villain of all time. The suit, James Earl Jones's voice, what else is there to say that hasn't been said better by somebody else? I love that you just know that's Princess Leia the first time you see her. Nobody has to tell you, you just know. She doesn't belong here. She's like a light in the darkness of this weird industrial hallway. That's gotta be the princess. Again, the visual storytelling in this movie is phenomenal. 3PO worrying about the spice mines of Kessel is such a great line. It happens a ton in this movie, but things will be mentioned and they won't be explained, and then we move on. But everyone in the story knows what the spice mines of Kessel or the Clone Wars are, and it gives the universe that lived-in feel Star Wars is so well known for. The death of Captain Antilles is the first thing in Star Wars I ever learned about. When I was 8 or so, I saw a cosplayer dressed as Darth Vader. I asked my dad who that was, and he said, that's Darth Vader. He can pick someone up by the neck with one arm. I decided that was something I had to see, so when we got home, we watched Star Wars on a VHS they had taped from TBS or something. Those memories come flooding back every time the poor captain dies. You gotta love that Leia doesn't go down without a fight. She still hasn't said a word, and we're learning so much about her character. And then when she does speak, it's to express her annoyance with Darth Vader. Just walks right up to him like, "Oh, it's you again." Like 3PO's earlier line, this gives us a sense that Leia and Vader have history together, like he's almost caught her several times, and now he's finally done it. And all of this is now made funnier by Rogue One, because Vader is like, "I just saw this ship leave Scarif, come on now." And I love how much Vader likes to point throughout this movie. Nowadays, I give Tatooine a lot of grief, not its existence, it just pops up in a lot of Star Wars stories, but that doesn't mean it's not awesome. The idea of an entire desert planet was so cool to me as a kid, and no, I hadn't read Dune at the time, I know Arrakis was first, but Tatooine was maybe the first alien planet I had ever seen, or at least it's the earliest one I can remember. The Krayt Dragon skeleton is such a simple way to remind the audience, hey, this isn't Tunisia, we're in outer space! The Jawas introduction creeped me out, and the jump scare got me good when I was a kid, and I love the little groan R2 lets out before he collapses, then that empty trash can sounding thump. You gotta love the Gonk droid, how could you not? And I love when the Jawas open up the sandcrawler, the Gonk droid runs off scared. I've always liked the Lars homestead's design, the little igloo-looking entrance to a pit, very neat. Owen telling 3PO to shut up always gets a laugh from me. And then there's Luke's insanely whiny line. People like to poke fun at that, but I think it's great. Yeah, it's a little over the top, especially for a 19-year-old, but it's exaggerated so we can see how much Luke changes over the course of the film. I've always had a soft spot for R5-D4. Even before I knew about any of his backstory that came up later in the expanded universe, I just felt bad for this little droid. He was so close to having a home. I remember being excited to get his action figure, which had a rocket hidden inside his head for some reason. Luke playing around with his little Skyhopper toy while his actual Skyhopper is parked right outside is so charming to me, just reinforcing his head in the clouds kind of thinking. He has to take care of the droids, so he can't go to Tashi Station or fly or do whatever he wants, so he's just sitting there daydreaming about it. Then we get our first Biggs Darklighter mention of the movie. Ignoring the fact that Leia is Luke's sister, I think it's hilarious how distracted Luke becomes by the princess's beauty, which allows R2 to manipulate him into taking off the restraining bolt. Luke will do anything to see more of that message. 3PO bonking R2 always gets a laugh from me as well, and then telling the little droid neither he nor Luke like him. It's cruel, but their bickering in this movie is so much fun. The dinner scene is interesting to watch now with all the extra knowledge about Obi-Wan, Darth Vader, and the Lars family that we find out in later films. Of course, learning that Vader is Luke's father gives extra weight to Owen's fear that Luke has too much of his father in him, but this scene wasn't shot with that in mind. It just wound up being a very happy accident. Also, we got our second Biggs mention. Obviously, I love the binary sunset. Again, Lucas is showing off his amazing visual storytelling. No dialogue, just a kid looking off, wishing he were somewhere else. And of course, there's John Williams' amazing music, so I guess it's not all visual storytelling, but still, it's great. Owen is the first person to swear in Star Wars, prompting people to ask me countless times if this means there is a hell in Star Wars. And yes, there is a version of it in some religions. I've always liked Luke's land speeder design. I had a lot of toys of it growing up and eventually the Lego set. If I could choose the next Lego Ultimate Collector's Series set, it would be the land speeder. I love that there's actually an elephant wearing that bantha suit. Nowadays, a creature like that would most likely be CGI, but back then, that wasn't an option. An elephant in a suit was the most practical choice. I appreciate Luke's excitement over the prospect of seeing sand people. He is so desperate for adventure and excitement, and he immediately winds up in over his head. This scene always reminds me of growing up watching Star Wars in the full screen aspect ratio because most TVs weren't widescreen. I remember hating widescreen VHSs and DVDs, like, why would someone want those stupid black bars at the top and bottom? But every time I got to this scene, and Luke says he could see one of the sand people, it would be cut off for me, and I was so confused about that for the longest time. I love the gag of a Tusken Raider entering the frame much closer the second Luke says that. And I love the Tusken battle cry. I mean, who doesn't? Hello there. Enough said. But seriously, Obi-Wan's introduction is great, and it's just two people sitting and talking on rocks. The music, the sense of wonder and history, and Alec Guinness's voice is just fun to imitate. Every time I hear the line about Luke's father supposedly being a navigator on a spice freighter, I have flashbacks to the countless times that's come up in bar trivia or some other Star Wars trivia competition. People love to use that one. The discussion of the Clone Wars always brings a smile to my face. At the time of making Star Wars, there was no guarantee we would ever explore that era. George was just writing a neat-sounding conflict into the script for flavor. It's wild to think those few mentions from Ben and Leia eventually led to Attack of the Clones, Revenge of the Sith, and a series with over 100 episodes. Everyone loves lightsabers. It's not surprising or special to say I do too, but this was the scene that started it all. We have the training and the actual duel later, but this was the scene that made me fall in love with the weapon. I think it's because we're getting to experience this moment alongside Luke. Obi-Wan's pause before telling Luke how his father, quote, died, is another moment that works so well in retrospect, accidentally. At the time, Obi-Wan was telling Luke the truth, and he's just preparing to tell a difficult story. But now when he pauses, he's preparing to tell a difficult lie. Our first glimpse of the Death Star is pretty brilliantly done. It starts with a Star Destroyer like saying, "Hey, remember how big that thing was?" And then it cuts to the Death Star with the Star Destroyer for scale. Awesome. Admiral Mahdi is perfect. He is so smug right off the bat and is instantly hateable. Obviously, I love Tarkin. I've never been able to roll my R's very well, and the only real reason I'm frustrated by that is because it means I'll never be able to do a good Tarkin impersonation. We also have to talk about Wolf Yularen, one of the many background characters of Star Wars that wound up getting more and more attention in future stories. I love seeing stuff like that happen. It's interesting that our first look at the Force is the dark side. So far, we've only had it described to us, and it sounds very mystical, but then we are immediately shown that it can be terrifying in the wrong hands. And of course, we get that iconic line, "I find your lack of faith disturbing." Luke calling R2 and 3PO robots always makes me smile. They're droids, not robots, you silly goose. I don't know if I would say I love the shot of the torched homestead, but it certainly stuck with me as a kid, as in it was burned into my memory and probably gave me nightmares. The ITO droid deserves a mention simply because it spawned Dr. Ball, MD, in the Robot Chicken parodies, and that is one of my favorite sketches. The shot of the door closing down to the boots of the Imperial Guard walking away has always stood out to me. I can't really give you a good reason why, but I've always liked it. It's so cool now to know that Obi-Wan had just wrapped up a conversation with Qui-Gon Jinn before Luke arrived back at the Sandcrawler. I always think about Claudia Gray's short story in the From a Certain Point of View book during this scene. I love the shot of Luke and company looking out at Mos Eisley, but it's also funny to me to think that Kenobi was like, "Oh, pull over here, there's a great view." And also, Luke knows what Mos Eisley is. He already mentioned it by name. It's purely for the sake of the audience, which is fine. I just find it funny to think about. The special edition changes are controversial, I know, but I had so much fun playing with my Ronto and Jawa action figures when I was 10 years old. I recreated this scene of the Jawa falling off and dangling there so many times. Since I already talked about Dr. Ball, I'm gonna have to point out this scene for creating, or at least contributing to the creation of Gary the Stormtrooper in the Robot Chicken specials, because he is the best recurring character, and he's played by my best friend in the whole world, Donald Faison. I mean, we just met the one time, but we are for sure best friends. There's so much to say about the cantina, so I'll try not to spend an hour here, but it is so cool. Even today, yeah, we had seen Jawas and Tusken Raiders, we knew there were aliens, but then this is almost overwhelming with how much new stuff is being thrown at you. I would have loved to see this in 1977 when this scene was even more unique. There are so many cool and creative characters packed into these shots. I think it's largely responsible for Star Wars' tendency to provide stories for anyone and everyone, because it feels like every single person in the cantina has a story to tell. I've got to talk about my love for the Cantina Band song, Mad About Me. I mean, first of all, it's an absolute banger. But when I was 8 or 9 and I was just diving into Star Wars facts and trivia, like not really on purpose, just because I was loving learning everything I could, I remember my friend Chris, who was in the same situation as me, at the bus stop he told me about how he just found out the Cantina song had a title and it was Mad About Me. Fast forward to 2019, over 20 years later, and that was the year I won the Dragon Con Star Wars Trivia Contest because I knew the name of that song. Life is weird, but I've got a huge connection to Mad About Me now. The image of Ponda Baba's bloody arm on the ground was similar to Owen and Beru's skeletons for me as a kid. It very vividly stuck in my mind. But now I have to look at it and just think about how hilarious it is that someone somewhere wrote that Aqualish blood doesn't cauterize because there is blood in this scene, and it simply wasn't decided how lightsabers worked yet. And I love the cantina patrons quickly going back to their business right after. The music picks back up and everyone's like, oh well, we see arms getting lopped off every day. Of course, I love Han Solo's introduction. As a kid, he's all bravado and confidence, and you're like, yeah, he is the best. But growing up, it's fun to see that shift. I don't care that George Lucas has claimed he always knew what he was writing when he put the parsecs line in there, and I know it's been confirmed to be true in canon, but I have always preferred the interpretation that Han is just talking out of his ass, and Obi-Wan just deadpan stares at him like, this guy's a moron. None of that makes me love Han any less. If anything, it makes me love him more. The Greedo scene is iconic, even with the special edition changes, which no, I do not like. But still, Han's laid-back demeanor, the way he scratches at the wall to distract Greedo from the fact that he's unholstering his blaster, the yes, I'll bet you have before blasting him, I still love all of that. And then I just kind of tune out the extra blaster fire. But you know what? I will say I'm okay with McClunky. At this point, it's like, why not? Why not add even more to this scene? I think it's hilarious that when this change happened in 2019, Star Wars fans were baffled, but everyone just kind of threw up their hands and they were like, fine, whatever, we're tired of being upset about this scene. You win, George. Anyway, sorry about the mess is a baller line. Garandan or Long Snoot is a cool design. You instantly know he's a spy or up to no good, dressed in a black cloak with a hood. He really stands out against the rest of the Mos Eisley citizens. The Jabba scene gets a lot of heat, and I'll admit it's completely unnecessary other than serving as an introduction to Jabba, but all of the exposition of this scene was placed into Han's conversation with Greedo, so it's redundant. But as a 10-year-old, I was so excited to see this. I knew about the deleted scene with the Scottish human version of Jabba, and I thought it was so cool they were putting it back into the movie. It uses Jabba's theme from Return of the Jedi, which was largely removed from that film. Yeah, the CG isn't great, but whatever. I even like the gag of Han walking behind Jabba and onto his tail. And there are like 3 Greedos in this scene. It's charming in its goofiness. I love the dice and the Falcon. That was another trivia question I remember a lot back when they were only in this scene. And then they started to become more prominent in movies like The Last Jedi and Solo. That was a fun touch and callback to make them slightly more significant. Han's snarky "don't everybody thank me at once" got a big laugh from me as a kid. I love his sarcasm mixed with an earnest need for validation. And who can forget "let the Wookiee win"? This whole scene is pretty funny despite the fact we just watched an entire planet die. It's just fun finally seeing at least most of our main characters interacting. Luke and Han especially serve as excellent foils to each other, optimism butting heads with cynicism. The build-up to our heroes becoming trapped inside the Death Star is so good. I remember getting hyped every time I watched this as a kid, mostly because I knew the movie was about to kick off into non-stop action, which I loved, but watching it for the first time is definitely an oh, poodoo moment. I always laugh at Darth Vader leaving poor Captain Kurgi in the lurch. He senses a presence he's not felt since... Since when, Vader? Stop being so dramatic and give me more information. Who's the more foolish, the fool or the fool who follows him, is still one of my favorite Star Wars lines. I loved it as a kid before I fully grasped what it meant, and I love it even more as an adult. I loved my action figures of Luke and Han in their stormtrooper disguises. The helmets that could come off and on were great, but I remember the Han Solo figure I had to get by eating Fruit Loops and sending in the proof of purchase. Happy memories. This goes for all the movies, but I always liked watching R2's Scomp Link shoot into a terminal. It should be on one of those oddly satisfying video compilations. You gotta love the poor mouse droid getting screamed at by Chewbacca and then zipping off. Apparently that was an idea they had on the day, as Mark, Harrison, and Peter all continued to bond. Obi-Wan bouncing around the halls trying to hide is excellent. Like, come on man, who are you fooling? I'm sure he's using the Force to cloud minds and all that, but it looks like someone should have seen him at some point. The detention block is where everything really kicks off when you're 8. I think it's so exciting because their plan is basically what any random kid would think up. I don't know, let's just walk in and shoot everything. And then it works. Kind of. Han's improvisation is still gold. These big dumb idiots have no idea what they're doing, but as a kid you're like, wow, they're actually doing it. I've always liked the design of the detention block hallway. I had a play set of it growing up, and it was a blast recreating these scenes, pun intended. Leia immediately calling out the stupidity of their rescue plan is perfection, as is Han's offer to put her back in her cell. I love all the banter in this sequence. The amount of times I have told one of my dogs that I don't care what they smell while channeling Han Solo energy is beyond count. I'm usually trying to get them to go to the bathroom in the rain and not force them into a garbage chute, but still, it's weird how often I've said this line myself. It's just one of those ways Star Wars winds up infecting every aspect of a fan's life. The Dianoga is great. I like that it wound up having a very similar story as the shark in Jaws. There were plans for it to be much bigger and more involved, and it kept getting scaled back to just glimpses for budgetary reasons, but I think not fully showing what the heroes are facing is more frightening. The Stormtrooper head bump as they come into the hangar control room used to be my big 10-year-old Star Wars fan flex. I remember being at a pizza place after a soccer game with my team, and Star Wars was on, and I told everyone to watch the rightmost Stormtrooper hit his head, and they all laughed. And then they probably all clapped and gave me $5. That's how I remember it anyway. But for real, it was fun pointing out something that nobody else had seen before, and I've been chasing that feeling ever since. I'm starting to realize it's probably the only explanation for me eventually creating this channel. I love 3PO's reaction to hearing everyone screaming over the comm link. It's hilarious, first of all, but it's great that for once he actually takes responsibility. He doesn't blame R2 for no reason, he accepts it. Good for him, showing some growth. Here's another trivia moment I have a good memory for. We were competing at bar trivia. I think this was before I started the channel, but it was definitely around that time. We were in third place, and the final question was a betting round, and you could wager all your points. The question was, what words are prominently written in the English alphabet in the original version of A New Hope before being replaced in the special edition? I did not know this answer, but I had a solid guess. Power tractor beam. I convinced our team to wager everything on that guess, and we got it right and took home the win. So I've got a smile at this scene every time now. God, I love Han's charge down the hall after the stormtroopers for no reason. I don't mind the addition of the entire hangar full of troopers he runs into in the special edition, but I also thought it was great when just those handful of troopers went, hey wait, why are we running from this screaming idiot? We can take him. I love Han and all his dumb decisions. The fact that there is a seemingly bottomless chasm in the Death Star is great. I mean, it makes no sense. It's just there because George Lucas wanted Luke and Leia to have a big heroic swing across a chasm. It doesn't matter that it doesn't make sense. All that matters is that feeling of adventure and overcoming an obstacle. People give the lightsaber battle between Vader and Obi-Wan way too much grief. No, it doesn't look as good as any of the others, but in 1977, nobody had seen anything like this, and it was an old man and a guy in a suit who probably couldn't see a thing. They're just doing their best, alright? Obi-Wan gets a fancy little spin in there. I like to think he was like, you still got the moves, Kenobi. You've still got the moves. This is 100% a retcon, but I love Obi-Wan's smile right before he becomes one with the Force. I think it was Claudia Gray who I first heard say it's her headcanon that he's smiling because he is seeing the Skywalker twins together again for the first time in almost 20 years. And he knows everything is going to be okay, his mission is complete, he is at peace, and he can go. I would do anything to sit in the Millennium Falcon's gun chairs. That looks like so much fun. And this music does not get enough credit. Everyone wants to talk about the main theme and the Force theme, and for good reason, but I have to sing along with this every time. The last TIE Fighter explosion is so dope. Why is it so big? I don't care. It's great. I really enjoy Han picking up on the fact that Luke has a crush on Leia and then teasing him over it, and that smile at the end. I love watching people become friends. This shot of Tarkin and Vader always cracks me up. Vader is monologuing and Tarkin gives him this look like, oh, you're still here? I love Rebel flight suits. The first Star Wars action figure I ever bought was Luke in his flight suit. The only choices at that time were either that or the crazy buff version in his Tatooine clothes. I think I remember that one being hard to find, but it didn't matter. I was all about Pilot Luke. But I'm more about this other pilot, Biggs freaking Darklighter. One day I'll do a video of its own on why I love the character so much, but it boils down to the fact that I learned a lot about movie making thanks to Biggs. I learned about the character and adaptations of the film. I learned that he was Luke's childhood best friend. I would see pictures of him from deleted scenes, and that was a crazy idea to me at the time. Why would someone go to the effort to shoot a scene and then just cut it out? Biggs sparked me going down this big rabbit hole where I learned a lot, and he'll always represent my early self-education on not just Star Wars, but movies in general. Also that mustache, I mean, damn. I also love X-Wings. What a cool design. Like a drag racer with wings that fold out. I don't know what it is about the wings that captivated me as a kid. Anytime I got an X-Wing toy with wings that would lock into attack position and vice versa, I could play with just that function for hours. It is the coolest starfighter design in any medium. The check-in sequence with all the pilots is fantastic. I've done a video on what makes a space dogfight successful to me, and part of it is the build-up and anticipation, the ability to just take a second to get to know these pilots even a little bit, even if all they're saying is their call sign. I think A New Hope does it best. Return of the Jedi and Rogue One also have that moment, even if it's shortened down to just the flight leaders. I can't tell you the hype I would have felt to even just hear something like that in The Rise of Skywalker. Alphabet Squadron standing by, Team Fireball standing by, Inferno Squad standing by. I love call-in moments like this, and it works because I remember being shocked and horrified and sad when I saw Porkins die for the first time. Speaking of, let's just celebrate Wedge Antilles for a second. Everybody loves Wedge, but I'd feel guilty if I didn't give him at least a shout out alongside Biggs and Porkins. His appearance in all three films is important, I think. It reminds us that there are always other people in this story. Luke and Han and Leia are running around the galaxy dealing with stuff, sure, but Wedge is there every step of the way too. The sound an X-Wing makes when it fires is one of my favorite sound effects of all time. I remember hearing that sound in one of the trailers for The Force Awakens and screaming. It immediately took me back to the Battle of Yavin. This is another retcon, but I really like knowing that this TIE fighter pilot is Iden Versio from Battlefront 2. Luke saving Biggs is of course a big hell yeah moment for me. And then Wedge saving Luke is sick. The confidence to blast a ship and then fly right through the explosion is astoundingly cool. And just in general, all of the random pilot chatter is so fun. 2020 and 2021 were rough, but one of the joys those years brought me was playing squadrons with friends and all of us just spouting out all these lines and making each other laugh. Gold 5 is especially great. Everyone loves his stay on targets, but all of his deliveries are so dramatic. He is insanely memorable. I'm a fan of Chief Bast only because I had like 50 of him in the trading card game. He was in like every pack I bought. But hey, it taught me his name. And he's the voice of reason in this scene, giving that out for Tarkin. I love that he then appears in the holiday special, which was obviously just some unused footage for A New Hope, but in my headcanon, Chief Bast tried to get Tarkin to evacuate, the man refused, and Bast was like, alright, whatever, I'm out of here. Also, his sideburns are out of this world. As much as I obviously hate that Biggs dies, his death scene is effective. It really sells the desperation of what's happening. Han's return to the battle will never not give me chills. It's one of the first movies I can actually remember that affected me like that. Just a surprise, what are these, emotions? The flight suit is still my favorite Luke outfit, but the medal ceremony look is a pretty close second. I love that yellow jacket. And those are all of my favorite things about A New Hope, the more personal connections I have to the film anyway. I can't list everything because I can't talk about every frame of this movie individually, that would be insane. But what are your favorite moments from the film? Let me know in the comments. If you haven't already, please like this video, subscribe to the channel, follow us on Twitter, Instagram, and TikTok, and consider checking out our Patreon page. As always, thanks for watching, and may the Force be with you.